Folks, if everyone could take their seats, we'll begin this morning. All right, welcome everyone back to day 2 of the 480th board meeting. Lots of lively conversation yesterday about a whole variety of topics, Antarctica, and a variety of other issues of importance. So there are a lot of committee reports coming up today, but look forward to that vibrant conversation. I think in the interest of time, I'll maybe defer long opening remarks. There's some opportunities later for us to talk about some of the key issues, but I'm going to hand the floor over to our director for his opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. What I have here is some senior executive updates, which I always do. And again, this is a very, very delightful thing as a job, as a director to do every meeting. So I'm thrilled to introduce to you some of the folks and also say goodbye to folks that have served NSF so admirably. As I was saying yesterday, we are so fortunate to have unbelievable leadership, unbelievable talent at NSF, which was exemplified to the awards that you saw yesterday that I presented in the open session. So since we met in May, we have welcomed several new executives. These individuals I'm going to introduce you are critical components of the leadership team at NSF, and their expertise will be very important in carrying out a strategic vision for the agency. The first is Dr. Dilma Da Silva and Dr. Irina Dolinskaya, who will be leading the Division of Computing and Communications Foundation as the Division Director and Deputy Division Director.
They're on the Zoom.
Are they there?
They're on the Zoom.
They are on the Zoom. Dilma and Irina, thank you so much. Look forward to working with you. Dr. Da Silva is on an IPA assignment and was until recently professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at Texas A&M University. She has also been a dean and department chair. She earned a doctorate in computer science from Georgia Tech. Dr. Irina Dolinskaya began serving her SES career appointment as Deputy Division Director. She previously served as Program Director in the Division of Civil, Mechanical, and Manufacturing Innovation in the Directorate for Engineering. Dr. Dolinskaya received her PhD in Industrial and Operations Engineering from the University of Michigan. Thank you. Our second team is Dr. Michael Littman and Dr. Wendy Nielsen, who will be leading the Division of Information and Intelligence Systems. Michael and Wendy, thank you so much for your service. Dr. Michael Littman is on IPA assignment from Brown University, where he is Professor of Computer Science and the Royce Family Professor of Teaching Excellence in Computer Science. Dr. Littman received his PhD in Computer Science from Brown University. Dr. Wendy Nielsen began serving her SES career appointment as Deputy Division Director. She previously served as Program Director of IIS in SAIS. Prior to joining NSF, she was a health scientist at the National Institutes of Health and an assistant professor at the University of Rochester School of Medicine. Dr. Nielsen received her PhD in clinical psychology from Purdue University. Always good to get people from NIH. Dr. Barry Johnson began serving his IPA assignment as Division Director, Division of Translational Impacts, TI. Some of you may know Barry from his previous role in NSF as in engineering. I have had a chance to engage with Barry when I was on the board and even before. He was until recently L.A. Lazy Distinguished Professor of Engineering and Director of the Computer Engineering Program within the School of Engineering and Applied Science at the University of Virginia. He received his PhD in Electrical Engineering from the University of Virginia. Barry, welcome on board. Great to have you back, and thank you for serving. Next, Dr. James McManus began serving his SES career appointment as Division Director, Division of Ocean Sciences in July. He was previously the Vice President for Research and Administration at the Bigelow Laboratory for Ocean Sciences. Dr. McManus received his PhD in oceanography from Oregon State University. James, are you here? He's on the screen. He's on Zoom. Hi, James. How are you? Welcome, and thank you for your service, sir. Dr. Jacqueline Huntoon began serving her IP assignment as Division Director, Division of Graduate Education, DGE, also in July. She was until recently Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs at Michigan Technological University. Dr. Huntoon received her doctorate in geology from Pennsylvania State University. Wonderful to have you, Jacqueline. Look forward to working with you. Thank you for your service. I would also like to share with you one additional executive transition. I am glad it is a transition because this is an amazing, amazing leader, and what she has accomplished at NSF and will continue to accomplish is really truly phenomenal. Dr. Peggy Hoyle has decided to step away from the general counsel position due to personal reasons. She and I had many conversations about this. As we all will agree, family comes first. Her service as NSF Chief Legal Advisor and Counselor has been superb, and I have appreciated the excellent leadership she has demonstrated as a member of the executive leadership team. Although she will be stepping down from her current role, Dr. Hoyle has agreed to serve as Senior Advisor in the Office of Equity and Civil Rights, OECR, where she will help advance and develop our agency efforts in promoting equal opportunity and advancing civil rights. I'm excited about the valuable contributions she will continue to make in support of our agency mission and the goals and objectives of the OECR team. Peg, please stand up. I mean, we should thank you so much for it. For those of you who have been in the board, at the time that I was in the board, Peg, if you'll recall, actually served as an interim general counsel when Larry was out on medical leave and did a fantastic job. And then I was so thrilled to have her as the general counsel. And so it's in a sense with mixed feelings, but more importantly, I want to make sure that we are there for Peg, as Peg has been there for the agency for so many years. And so thank you, Peg. I really appreciate that. Therefore, Deputy General Counsel, Mrs. Ona Haas, who's not here today, has agreed to serve as the acting general counsel. I'm sure that Mr. Haas will serve just as able a partner as Dr. Hoyle in coordination with the NSB. Thank you all to all our new and continuing senior executives. Over to you, Mr. Chair. I think we have an OLPA report. If you think that in your board book, Amanda Greenwell has provided you with an information item on legislative and public affairs activities since the August board meeting. As you know, I keep periodically forwarding to all of you. I hope I'm not spamming your mailboxes of the OLPA weekly reports, because I just tend to not do it all the time, but sometimes, so you have a sense of the amazing activities happening. And keeping with that spirit, today you're going to receive an email from me with 2 articles that appeared yesterday, one in The Hill, which got picked up by MSN, as well as in a CQ roll call interview. So I'm going to send that to you. So I hope that all of you will find that useful. So as always, OLPA has kept us connected to the administration, the Hill, our scientific community, and the public. I noted some of these in my remarks yesterday. Do you have any questions on the OLPA report that has been submitted? Because Amanda is here to answer any questions if you may have.
Questions from anyone?
Hearing none, I say when there are no questions, I used to say that to my students back in my university. No questions means everything is so well understood. That's one interpretation. The other is nothing is understood, why bother? And I used to tell my students, if you don't have any questions, I will assume the former. So I will assume the former. Thank you all so much. Back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Let me add my thanks to those of you who are joining NSF. It's a critical piece, and one of the things I think that makes NSF special is the steady rotation of people from the academic community to NSF. It brings new ideas, new blood, and perhaps most importantly, it keeps NSF grounded in what the community is thinking and its concerns and its issues, and also the intellectual opportunities as they evolve. So to all of you, welcome. And to Peg, thank you again for your service. I want to note that our director was on the radio this morning with NPR, and so it's another example of outreach and engagement in the community and spreading the word about the importance of what NSF does. So any questions for Ponch before we move on? All right, seeing none, we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule, so I'm sure that won't last, but that's okay. Let's maybe move on then to the committee. Thank you, Ponch. Move on to the committee reports, and I'm going to start by turning the floor over to Steve Willard for his report from the Committee on Oversight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I note this is a hybrid meeting, and so I will try to meet the requirements of not speaking off a script, but it is hybrid, so I may look at a script from time to time. The committee began our new term with a meeting last Friday, the 29th. Steve Leith, my co-counsel, and I opened the meeting with an ambitious agenda, but one we believe is aligned with the board's vision and that we believe has the potential to make meaningful impacts for the NSF outcomes. We condensed it into 8 pillars to provide an illustration to frame the work the Committee on Oversight will be doing. The first one is data. We'll talk a lot about data in the next few sessions of this board. It is absolutely fundamental, not that only that we have the maximum amount of data, but that we use it in the most effective way. We talked about the Merit Review Digest. We do that annually. We expect the first draft to come out from our colleagues at NSF later in the month. And it's an important part not only of our oversight, but also of our messaging, because I think merit review is one of the things that distinguishes the National Science Foundation and what it does really is a beacon to others in terms of allocation of funding. A third element important to us is the broader impacts, of course. There's been a lot of discussion within this board and whatever about what exactly broader impacts mean and how they are evaluated. We will continue to work on that. The big thing that I really would like to propose for the support of the board is a re-examination of the merit review process. It hasn't been done for 11 years. As I said, it is the beacon of so much of what we do, and we would like to make sure that it reflects our values: diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. We really believe it's time to consider in the merit review process, and I was gratified that Dan put that in his memo as a priority for us. EPSCoR, we have an upcoming final report of the Committee on Equal Opportunities in Science and Engineering, what we call CEOS. EPSCoR is important for so many things, and is mentioned in the recent legislation. Enterprise risk management, you guys are probably sick of my questions about enterprise risk management, but that's okay, because I think we learn a tremendous amount from trying to plan for the things that go wrong or could go wrong in the future, and analyzing the things that have gone wrong for lessons learned and ways of improving what we do. Again, the DEIA that I talked about, the board has made it clear that the strategy for DEIA and oversight of that strategy are a top priority for us. We continue to monitor responses with regard to the Racial Equity Task Force recommendations and NSF's harassment and travel policies. And finally, the last pillar is our continuing excellent relationship with NSF staff and our oversight role. I mean, I could not be more pleased with the quality of the people we interact with. A special thank you to you, Nimi, for making it possible to have the warm relationship that we do with the NSF staff. It makes oversight ever so much easier. So as I said last Friday, I hope this sets the stage for a very productive 2 years of the Committee on Oversight, in hopes of leaving the NSF better than we found it. The committee began immediately addressing some of these pillars. As we know, quality data is essential. Again, the two fundamental questions drilling it down are we getting the maximum amount of data that we can, and are we using it as effectively as we want, as we could? The committee intends to work actively with NSF and other committees during the next 2 years to determine where more and better use of data can occur. And in fact, the chair has given time later in this meeting to continue that discussion. The committee heard from the Inspector General's office on the extensive work they have completed related to EPSCoR. Inspector General Allison Lerner and Assistant Inspector General for Audit Mark Bell briefed us that from 2019 to 2021, OIG audited 10 EPSCoR award recipients, 7 audit reports questioning more than $2.7 million in charge costs. These findings and recommendations will be very helpful to us as we continue to seek ways to further EPSCoR's successful expansion of the geography of innovation. And I think it's crucial, the OIG makes it its mandate not just to play gotcha and to catch problems, but to also work on proactive ways to make sure that people will actually do a better job going forward. So I'm pleased with that. And then finally, we heard from NSF Chief Financial Officer and Performance Improvement Officer, Teresa Grankovich, who updated the committee on the financial and performance topics. We are delighted with her promotion and look forward to working with Jessica. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the Committee of Oversight's report. I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Are there questions or comments about that? And as Steve rightly noted, after the committee reports this morning, we'll have an extended informal discussion about data access, provenance, and needs to address board and NSF issues. But any questions or comments for Steve? All right, hearing none, we will move on to Dario for a report from the Committee on External Engagement. It had a retreat yesterday, and he's going to give us an update on some thoughts about where external engagement will go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Indeed, we had a wonderful and very dynamic discussion yesterday. We met at 9 a.m. for an hour. We also had the opportunity to have Dan present as well, and Vic join us as well to have a good discussion on some of these topics. And the moment again to remind everybody that President Biden plans to sign the CHIPS and Science Act actually on Tuesday at 10 a.m. And while we recognize that there's been similar, well, not identical, but authorizations to significantly increase the size and scope and impact of NSF in the past, they don't happen that frequently. And so this is really a unique moment for NSF and one that the board intends to seize. At the EE retreat, we touched on ideas for a long-term strategy for engagement, but we really focus our discussion around the near-term actions that we should be taking over the coming months to basically, as the outcome, to convert authorizations to appropriations. And the legislation that the new TIP directorate incorporates in the bill, as well as some other expanded missions, really is a fresh opportunity for us to make that. So the first message, I think that it was very consistent in the discussions in the retreat, was this sense of urgency of what we need to do. And we focus around how we could activate, beginning in the near term, some constituencies that would expand the traditional sort of like academic constituency that has been the key advocates for NSF. So particularly, we talked about ways in which we could begin activating the business community that has a massive dependency on the mission of NSF in terms of talent in STEM. How could we activate the national security community that also has a dependency on the outputs that get produced? And the regional economic development activities that the TIP is going to so wonderfully exemplify. We recognize the fact that it'll take time to activate this, so we will have to do things perhaps a little bit opportunistically in the beginning, but we can start nonetheless. And we also talked about the content dimension of it. What are the artifacts, such as letters, opinion pieces, and other evidence that we could use in the context of potential meetings with members of Congress and appropriators in the coming months. In fact, on that topic, we explore the idea that in the upcoming retreat, given that Congress will be in session, that it may offer a good opportunity for a subset of members of the board and perhaps some other constituencies that we just talked about to be able to make the case for these appropriations of what Congress has already authorized. So in terms of next steps, we are going to develop in much more detail the short-term strategy. And of course, we will continue to work on the longer-term strategy ideas. And we will be, of course, sharing that with the broader board as it gets developed. But we're talking weeks, not months, in terms of creating that short-term set of actions we need to execute. So since I think we have a few minutes left in my allotted time, happy to take any questions or comments for those participating.
Questions or comments about external engagement strategy? I mean, I'd echo, I think there is a bit, to use a political phrase, some fierce urgency of now and capitalizing on the authorization opportunity. There are near and long-term issues, obviously, as we have talked about, some near-term actions, but long-term thinking about messaging and influence building. And I was reflecting on that as our former colleague Jerry Richmond was talking yesterday about the translation of research from basic research and DOE through the national labs and into industry. And I think TIP offers us an opportunity to think about that pipeline and ways that we can sharpen the tip of that spear in terms of making not only a political but a very real case that the influence is both long-term but also near and medium term. So comments from anyone about that?
If I may, yes, also for the record, I think we will see that in the External Engagement Committee, we will drive an approach of discipline in terms of messaging and consistency on the messaging. And I just want to state for the record that even though we will pick very select things that we need to communicate for a very specific audience to drive the maximum impact, it in no way reflects the fact that the committee, and I think by extension the board, does not appreciate the full range of activities that happen in NSF, or nor that we don't love all the activities that happen in NSF. But a key rule of communication is who is the intended audience, what is the most effective message, and what are the outcomes we're trying to drive. And very often complexity and breadth go counter to those objectives. So I just want to say for the record that if you see us very disciplined around that, it's not because we don't care about the rest of the vital vision of NSF.
Boy, I do. I need to go fetch more coffee for people. This is a quiet group this morning.
Can I just make a comment?
Yes.
Both of these committees that you've heard from so far, and I think it may precede the remaining reports, sort of require and ask the NSF's help in helping us do our job better. And we certainly have it from Steve, and we've heard it also. Maybe it's OLPA in your case, maybe it's somebody else in the CO, but I think we ought to chart each of these things as we go through the committee reports. Make notes of where we need input and help from the NSF to do our job better. If we are to be on the Hill, or if we are to really accomplish the goals that Steve set forward, we need some dedicated assistance for all of these things, and it can't just be pushed aside. But I think that list is going to grow longer in this meeting, and I'd like us to make a real effort to identify where we need assistance, so we can really be the advocates that you need.
Yes,
Dario, would you like to comment on the 80% computer science talent? So that's a very good.
Yeah, this I'm gonna channel Margaret on a figure she often shares. Just an example of illustrating the impact that NSF has on vital areas for the nation. If we just lay out and put forth the generic argument of how important is, for example, software to the success of institutions and national security, let's say, the Pentagon, or businesses, small, medium, and large around the world. And we ask that question, in your future, do you think software and computer science, as an example, is going to be more, or less important to your success? I would say that we would find a massive consensus around institutions across America that they would say is enormously important to our future. And an incredible fact that I don't think, even though Margaret does share it very broadly, but I don't know that everybody knows, is that if you look at the field of computer science, the National Science Foundation supports about 80% of that field. It's a startling and remarkable number of impact. So quite literally, the success of institutions across the United States depend on that core mission, and expanding that mission and doing it more effectively would have a transformative impact to literally every institution across the United States. I'm just bringing it up as an example of things that can give us a lot of crispness when we're communicating to key actors in appropriations and other areas, or activating the national security establishment about why it matters. So I think we will need help in picking a few things and driving that level of consistency of impact. But again, I'll emphasize a point for clarity for the last time, that it is not because the board does not appreciate the breadth of scientific regions around that. And if we make an example of that, it's just because it allows us to, as a result of that, get more resources for everybody.
I would want to add to that combining a statistic like that we're responsible for training and supporting 80% of computer scientists, combining that with the unmet need, it makes a very, very strong case for expansion of funding. Because if the 80% we're training is still only 20% of what industry requires or would optimally want to have, well, then we need more money, right?
I think that's a really good example. And for example, a very powerful carrier of that message would be the recipients of that need. So that's why it's important to activate those constituencies where key business leaders of some of the most critical sectors in our economy, or key leaders of our national security establishment, saying, I need that future. I need it today. I need a lot more of it. And the agency that can carry that out and can make it happen is the National Science Foundation. Those are words that today are not coming out of those leaders. And we need to help them and attract them and make that happen.
Another thought on this front is in other areas of my life when I'm not sitting in this room, I work a lot with people who produce model legislation, who produce scripts essentially for people. You don't want it to become so cookie cutter that it's obvious people are simply repeating text that has been given to you, but helping people know what to say and providing them with a clear message can be very, very helpful, and it can be one of the functions that we assist people with.
Mr. Chair, and I cannot thank enough the two committees who have spoken so far. I'm sure I'll say that of all the committees, but these are very, very important things for NSF. And I'm so glad that we are taking this moment. It is all about the moment. This moment is very important, and I'm glad that we are focusing on this moment. More importantly, what NSF has been doing, but more importantly, what it can do. And so that's very important. So I'm very happy to hear that you're all focused on that. And anything that we can do, to Roger's point, anything that we can do to be of assistance, NSF is always ready. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think that connects with what Roger said and what Maureen said, as well as what Dario is saying. We need to make the case clearly, precisely, and data-driven. It's clearly tied up with the missing millions, because workforce issues are deeply tied up with that, along with the equity issues that Steve rightly mentioned. And then there's the whole set of issues about the economic and national security impacts and how we make that case. But I sort of view, the broad priorities that Ponch has laid out and the issues that we've been talking about, the need to act with urgency to make a case for increased funding, but the missing millions and the economic impact that TIP potentially offers, they're all tied together, driven by the basic research enterprise that's the fuel of new ideas that drives innovation. And how we continue to tell the integrated story, but in a way that resonates politically, is really important, because I think the future depends on that, not just metaphorically, but very literally. So other questions or comments on this topic? All right. Yes.
One last thing. I think we really do need to make optimal use of Jerry Richmond and the assistance and collaboration she's offered us. I think that's a tremendous resource and one that would have a lot of traction associated with it.
So I will say as an aside, I'm very much thinking that we will spend a big chunk of our upcoming retreat talking about these issues. And I should note that Suresh B. and Vic have graciously agreed to co-chair the planning for that. So thanks to both of them for being willing to do that. We'll move on to Maureen for her report from the Committee on Science and Engineering Policy, which also met yesterday for its discussion. So Maureen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As the National Science and Engineering Policy, or SEP Committee, looks ahead to new board members and to the upcoming indicator cycle, a really high priority of mine is to seek input and co-creation of both priorities and products for the SEP Committee, both with SEP Committee members, but also with the board in general and with other committees of the board, as we all pursue our shared goals that are outlined in Vision 2030. As one example, we discussed ways in which the 2024 indicator cycle could increase its value to our stakeholders, especially surrounding the issues of competitiveness, as well as critical and emerging technologies. So this could be in the reports themselves or in standalone releases or policy products. Issues related to supply chain, to chips, to advanced engineering materials, and others may be of heightened interest to all of us. Of course, we are considering adding data to the thematic reports. We need to also be mindful that we should probably be streamlining those reports to avoid unreasonable and ever-continuing expansion of the thematic reports. We also heard in our meeting from the NCSCS about the new America's Data Hub Consortium, which is a component of the NCSCS mission to provide policy-neutral but policy-relevant statistical data on U.S. science and engineering. So the consortium will expand partnership capabilities, and it's exciting to hear about this new capacity to securely link data. And we look forward to seeing what the consortium does and see it as an opportunity for our committees to engage with it in the future. Finally, we discussed recently released and developing policy items. We began with an update of the board's brief on international STEM talent that was released in May. The committee was thrilled to see how much attention this message received in the public and expressed our desire to continue to highlight this issue as we move forward. It's not a one and done kind of topic, but one that's going to need continuous attention and an emphasis as we move forward to address questions of STEM workforce and STEM talent. For potential new topics, the committee was full of many very interesting ideas that we will consider over the months to come. And they included coordinating with ESCI on the topic of early education and the impacts of early education on STEM pathways, considering data needs in research security topic areas, considering our concern about high levels of student debt, which has been a concern we've all had for quite some time now, and especially how that debt can be an impediment to progression of people in graduate careers in STEM. And general exploration of mechanisms for making STEM graduate student experiences more productive and more rewarding as a means of retaining people in the field, rather than having the relatively high rate of dropout, of leakiness of our STEM education pipeline that we currently experience. So is there anything that my fellow committee members or my co-chair would like to add to this report?
Ryan, I think you covered everything. I don't, except the supply chain includes the STEM workforce too. That's also we discussed.
Yes, absolutely. Human capital being one of our most important capital elements. Are there any questions from other board members? Roger?
Do you anticipate that some of these additional requests will result in reduction in other sections of the report, or are these added on?
No, I'm really hoping that we can keep the overall indicators at a manageable level, because if we keep adding new information without subtracting, we just are in an ever expanding state. So I think there will be active discussion regarding things that could potentially be retired or published only in an electronic form. We need to evaluate the content to keep it up to date, relevant, and useful, optimally useful.
Brings back the question of the data about who reads what, or how many reads there are, or openings there are in each chapter, right? Data.
One thing I neglected to mention, but I want to alert all of you to, as board members, I know you all know we are all obligated to review and provide input on the thematic reports, and one of the things that we're working on actively right now is to have a convenient, accessible, ideally electronic dashboard that you can go to that will list all of your responsibilities, all of the dates. Because I, even as vice chair last year, received so many emails that all had confusingly overlapping titles for the multiple votes that we have to do at the various stages of approving these reports, and it became overwhelming and terribly confusing. I mean, I can't count the number of times I looked at a report and go, wait a minute, I know I've read this one twice already. Why am I doing this again? So hopefully we can clarify that, keep it very streamlined, keep you on track, and really highlight for everybody on the board the points at which your input is most, which is at the detailed narrative outline stage. So when you receive the detailed narrative outlines, being able to block some time out of your schedule to really put some concerted thought and creative input, that's the stage at which you can most directly influence the content, the structure, the organization, the presentation of the data, and that's where we really need your help the most. So hopefully this will be a big improvement this cycle.
Well, I'm going to hand the floor to Julia, but before I do that, I want to offer compliments to her and those of you who worked on the restructuring of the indicators, because one of the things that was really clear as Vic and I were talking to people on the Hill this summer was they are read, and there is enormous interest in the international aspects, and in particular, that was very clear. But the restructuring into smaller bite-sized chunks made it, I think, much more accessible to people than the tome that would hurt your foot if you dropped it on a paper copy. So thank you. And Julia, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, just a few things, just building off of these previous comments. And one of them is that I can't overstate how important and fruitful the collaboration that the board enjoys with NCSES is. It is phenomenal, and the NCSES is showing a lot of initiative in terms of looking at data, looking at new data sources, and putting out, data-only types of reports from which the board may wish to springboard and add more of the policy implications and so forth, which is more of our purview. And so some of the things that may go away from indicators per se may very well, if assuming that they continue to be current and of interest, may evolve into some of these more standalone types of products. So just because they aren't in indicators doesn't mean that they go away.
Any other questions or comments about the Science and Engineering Policy Report? Suresh.
There was some discussions about data being very dynamic also, and that was discussed in the committee also. So quickly get it to the end users also.
Yeah, and there's always this tension between vigorously vetted data and data that's 10 years out of date. Not that our data is 10 years out of date, but there is always that reality of what's actually true on the ground right now. And certainly with accelerating pace of change, that's an important issue. So I will.
Could I just highlight that? Because, just highlight that again,
yes.
because often we see reports on a topic that we might report on in the SEI that come out from other sources, and it sometimes feels like we are behind with other agencies doing certain things, covering the same material, and I think fighting against that, or being topical, or retiring something that's already been reviewed by another agency. Just keeping our eyes on that component, so that our SEI is really the new information that's added to what other agencies say. So, we're not the only ones doing data collection on all topics.
Point well taken. All right, let me turn the floor over to Julia. One of the things that the board has been looking at is the socioeconomic impact on diversity in STEM, and Julia is going to give an update on that working group.
Thanks very much, Dan. Good morning, everybody. I'd like you to kind of remember back to sort of the turn of the year when we were in the final throes of looking at the summary report for science and engineering indicators that was released in January. And at that time, the board had a very robust discussion about the missing millions, about which we feel very passionately. We've talked about it in Vision 2030, and it shows up pretty prominently in the summary report. And there was a collective realization that, yes, the missing millions, as we had articulated it at that time, is incredibly important, but that does not capture all of the potential STEM talent that we are missing. And another huge cut for that missing population are those from low SES backgrounds. Many of those people, of course, fit into our definition of the missing millions, but many of them don't. And so that was the origin of the SES working group, which was led very ably in its first months by our chair, and Dan, and by the SEP chair, Maureen. They, of course, have ascended in their roles, and I've taken over the leadership of this ad hoc group. We've had one meeting since the May board meeting, and this just emphasizing that this draws very strongly from Vision 2030, and it touches on several of the priorities that the board articulated in that document. Particularly relevant right now is the need to expand the geography of innovation. So there's a very strong coupling with TIP and some of TIP's priorities, and also the really clarion call to develop STEM talent for America. And we said in the vision, we need all hands on deck. So that includes individuals from low SES backgrounds as well. And so, those who grow up in poverty, who face homelessness and food insecurity, may be the first ones in their family to go to college, face barriers in their pursuit of STEM education, and many of those in this room face those barriers. Some of us were fortunate enough not to, but arguably those barriers have become even higher over time as the cost of cost of education has gone up, and the Pell Grants and so forth have not kept pace. So we need to shed light on the different barriers that these individuals face and identify potential solutions. And clearly, as the board is wont to do, we need to speak out about the issues that we identify, and we need to develop a drumbeat of messaging around these issues, and as appropriate, tie them to other board and NSF priorities. So we expect to be regularly releasing relevant data and policy recommendations that call attention to this issue in the broader context of the science and engineering enterprise. And we hope to work with NSF to discuss and explore ways that the foundation can increase accessibility and persistence in STEM for those from these low SES backgrounds. So we're going to follow the data and dive into first, of course, what is currently available. And NCSES has joined us in some very fruitful conversations, pointing to some rich data sets that will inform some of our near-term work. We also, I would expect, will build from the one-pager on the financial barriers faced by the missing millions, those from the underrepresented racial and ethnic groups in this country, because there is a lot of overlap and synergy there. And we want to assess the representation of low SES students in STEM at both the undergraduate and the graduate levels. We'll be tracking new data as they are released, and we do expect some new data to come out relatively imminently, so that we can continue to call attention to this issue at a time when college enrollments are down. And in large part, the decrease in enrollment, we believe, is due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but also lingering issues that are not likely to go away anytime soon. And there are national trends away from higher education in general. Not just in these groups, but maybe particularly in these groups, but we don't really know yet. So over the long term, we want to identify the gaps in the data and options to meet them. And that includes NSF data, also other data sets that NCS can help us get access to. So, very much a work in progress. I think there is hope that we may be able to get a one-pager out pretty soon that builds on the Missing Millions one-pager that we did not all that many months ago. And I'm really excited about the work to come in the next several months. I think it has the potential to build and couple very strongly to some of the other very strong board priorities at this point. So that's where we are. And I am happy to ask the working group to provide any comments they wish to, as well as any comments from the rest of the board.
Any comments or questions from anyone? I will just say, if you've seen any of the SAN charts that show the quintiles of economic distribution and the probability of mobility out of lower quintiles, it is very sobering data. And of course, many of those students are also students of color. So it's an important issue. I'm a firm believer, and I know I speak for all of us in saying, talent does not respect circumstances of birth, and we're in the business of cultivating and supporting and nurturing talent wherever we find it, because that's the future. It always has been. Artie, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, the TIPS bill will lead, we anticipate, to an expansion of our funding of EPSCoR institutions. That represents an opportunity to expand and diversify the STEM workforce. On the other hand, we ought to pay attention to two things. One was the Inspector General's report that 7 out of the 10 EPSCoR institutions that they looked at had findings. And on the other hand, the remarks that we heard when we were pursuing the structured technical workforce, that the faculty were not well supported administratively in their research. I hear that over and over again at the institutions. We know very well that the administrative reimbursement on our government contracts does not cover the cost of administrative support, and yet that administrative support is a very important part of research. The purchasing, the financial controls, things of that sort. I think it would be good if we looked at some of these problems, or perhaps had a national Academy Committee look at these problems, because this is a real opportunity, but we better use it well and make sure these institutions have the support that they need to effectively enlarge the workforce.
Artie, you make an excellent point. And in fact, one of the things that when I was talking to the senator the other day was how might we provide the support for several things, which is grant writing, pre-award, post-award, putting budgets together. All of this help that typically research universities that are well endowed have the ability to do naturally. And so the granted program is going to help a lot in this regard. But that alone is not enough. To Artie's point, that alone is not enough. That is necessary but not sufficient. So we were talking about how we might bring the administrations of those universities also to work with us so that the burden that they have in terms of teaching 4 or 5 courses sometimes even, how might that be alleviated so that if you want to raise the research profile of these institutions, it requires not only support in terms of the ideas being presented in the best possible form, but also how they may get help in terms of relief to actually do the research itself in addition to research infrastructure. So these are very important points, and you make an excellent case for how this is an important moment and we should seize it and do good with it, because that's a very important thing that we should keep an eye on. So thank you for your comments.
Anila, did I see your hand up? You're muted.
I have never learned. Anyway, I'm actually coming back. I've heard your argument, I think, in this venue before, Artie, about EPSCoR, and I agree with it completely. And before I moved on to be a consultant, I believe that, in fact, OIA was engaging with EPSCoR universities, I had believed this, to find out in town hall meetings, to find out some of the causes that they perceived for their inability to do these, apart from, a more formal way of looking at this. And I don't think we've heard any results from these town hall meetings coming back to us, at least not formally. And so it would be interesting to hear what the interactions between, I believe OIA was running it, Susie certainly was very strong on this. I would like to say that I think it would be good to hear what was coming back to us and what they would most like to see, because NSF has been, even already this morning, there have been remarks that NSF is maybe a little behind the curve somewhere. I've understood from OIA over the years that sometimes it's good to be a little behind the curve and watch what other people are actually doing before we leap in. So this seemed a reasonable way to proceed. So I would just like to know if those kinds of conversations are proceeding, and if they are there results that are coming out that are illuminating for us.
Thank you, Anila. And if those of you watching wonder why there's a little consternation, the National Science Board logo just fell off the wall here.
Exciting meeting.
So we'll take care of that at the break. Other questions or comments about this issue? All right. Speaking of breaks, those of you who are online, we're going to take a break here. We're going to reconvene at 12:15 Eastern Time.
We're going to reconvene at 10:15.
Yeah, I know. I'm not finished yet. It's okay. So for the closed plenaries, and we'll hear the Committee on Awards and Facilities and the Subcommittee on TIP. But we're going to, in this room, break until 10:15. And then in the Coleridge spirit of water everywhere and not a drop to drink, we will talk about data. And so I'm going to hand the floor over to Andrea, and she's going to in the live streaming here. And then we
Mr.
will-
Chairman, if I could just make as
Yeah.
a fellow Mountain West person, it's actually 10:15 Eastern time. It's 12:15 for you and me, I think is the, so that the folks online know.
I stand corrected. Thank you very much. All right, welcome back to the open session of the board meeting. The next item on the agenda is the chair's activities, aka how I spent my summer vacation. So wanted to just highlight a few things that I've mentioned a bit before. Vic McCrary and I spent time this summer meeting with Hill staffers because obviously what became CHIPS and Science was in full flight at the time. We also met with OSTP and talked to them about their perspective and some of our priorities. And then we spent, as those of you on the board know, spent quite a bit of time talking about priority items for the board going forward. And I wrote with input from the board chairs a memo trying to outline what were key things that we were going to address as part of committee activities and as the board for the next couple years. And they are entirely consistent with the same items that Ponchas discussed, how we think about messaging around appropriations with respect to turning authorization into dollars, the missing millions in the priorities around addressing both the numbers and the diversity of the STEM workforce. The geography of innovation, as Dario just showed with the really phenomenal initial response to the regional innovation engines as part of TIP, and then TIP itself and the issues around that. We also talked, and Ponch and I spent a bunch of time talking about this as well, how to streamline some of the collaborations and meetings involving the committees. And so we're continuing to work on that. But I think I certainly viewed this meeting as a great example of progress in that space. So delighted about that. Ponch and I participated in the TAMAS meeting, which was in Texas. The Academy's members in El Paso. It's unfortunate that Heather was unable to join us. She was going to be the moderator, but was in quarantine, unfortunately. But we had a great conversation with them about NSF and those futures. So moving on to the next item, we have surveyed all of you regarding meeting dates for 2023. And there is a proposal for calendar dates in the board book. We tried to accommodate the maximum number of people given various people's conflicts. And so I'd like to ask if there is a motion to approve those meeting dates.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. Is there a resolution to read, Andrea?
No, there is.
Okay. Then.
Do we know at this point, Dan, or do you have any idea where the retreat will be next year?
Sorry, what?
Any thoughts about the retreat location for next year, or is that too far out?
I don't think next year, I don't think we know yet. That's a topic for conversation. This year's retreat is going to be here in DC. And so, as I said, Vic and Suresh B are co-chairs to plan that, but next year, not yet. So welcome ideas. I think, those of you who've been around longer remember that the last retreat we held in Boulder, and it gave us an opportunity to go visit one of the NEON sites and also to go up to Kitt Peak. which, as Aaron rightly noted now, is a little problematic. And some people went to Chile as well to visit the Rubin and the other telescopes there. So I think there is value in thinking about visiting science sites, but also this year, given the timeliness and the politics of CHIPS plus science, there's a real advantage, I think, in being here this year. DC Plus, it's an opportunity that is easier for us to interact with NSF leadership, and for many of us, with the 2+ years of COVID, there hasn't been that much personal interaction other than Zoom, and so some real advantages to that proximity, but no, not for next year. Alan, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just a favor, if I can ask staff to formally send out an email with those meeting dates to all of us and to our schedulers / assistants after we pass this motion.
We will absolutely do that. Thank you, Alan.
Thanks. That'll be helpful.
Any other comments? All right, I'm just going to ask for a voice vote. All those in favor of the proposed dates?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, motion carries. All right, I'll turn to the next item on the agenda, which is the approval of prior I can speak for a living. I'll turn to the approval of the open minute. Boy, let's try this again. Approval of the open meeting minutes from May 5 to 6, 22 meeting. I knew I could get that out. They're in your diligent board books. Are there any corrections? Hearing no corrections, the minutes will stand as approved. And now I will turn the floor over to our director for some closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And all I will say is that it was a fantastic meeting. It's great to have all of you in the NSF building. Some of you have seen for the first time. It is really truly a pleasure and joy to have all of you here. Hopefully, we'll have all members moving forward in the building. It was wonderful interacting with all of you. And I personally want to thank you, Mr. Chairman and the Vice Chairman and all the members for a superb meeting, and all the committee chairs, vice chairs, and the committee members for an amazing, engaging discussion. So let's keep this moving forward at speed and scale. So thank you so much.
Well, I want to echo that. I've really been delighted with the discussion and the lively debate about important issues. I think we've formed a lot of plans for things that will move the foundation forward together. And so I'm really grateful for the participation and the collaboration and the spirit of can-do. And so I really have nothing else to add beyond asking if anyone else would like to offer a parting comment.
I thought that the dialogue in these couple of days and the format of the meetings was a fantastic improvement from past versions. So I think some of the reforms that have been instituted have been very successful. So thank you for doing that.
That's all she wrote. So I'm going to bang the gavel and send us home a half an hour early. So thank you all.